alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is an author and filmmaker, Bob Brill. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Well, thanks, Tim. Glad to be here.
So it's great to have you on the show, and I as I take it, you write westerns, correct?
About half my books are westerns.
Okay.
I'm writing in the process of writing a western series called Lancer, Hero of the West. And each book takes place in a different city. Lancer is, and there will be 10 of them. There's 5 now. I do about one a year. It's my one a year project that I like to embark upon, and it kind of gets me away from everything else. And Lancer is a good guy, Western hero, works out at Tombstone, and then he travels. He interacts with the guys in Tombstone. So he's friends with Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and Morgan Earp and those guys, and enemies of the Cowboys. And at the same time, he does his job. In other words, he's based there, but he goes to other cities to solve crimes or work with people or help people. And so far he's been to Prescott, Arizona, Los Angeles, Santa Fe, El Paso, and then the latest one is New Orleans.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I haven't read a whole ton of westerns personally. I mean, it's probably just a generational thing in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
But I've enjoyed a lot of the movies that I've seen, the older western movies, and actually even a few of the newer ones, newer as in like Unforgiven and Three Ten Yuma.
Unforgiven is just a fantastic film.
Oh, yeah, love that movie.
It's one of the best. I mean, my favorite Western probably is, it's kind of a tie. My favorite film used to be The Horse Soldiers with John Wayne and William Holden. I grew up loving that film. And then when Field of Dreams came along, that became my favorite film. But probably realistically, my all-time favorite Western is High Noon. Okay. And it's one of those films that's just, I read the original script, and there's about 20% of it that was never made. The story takes a lot of different turns from the original writer, who was blacklisted, actually. And it happens to Carl Foreman wrote the script, never got credit for it until after the blacklisting ended. And his nephew actually is a good friend of mine. But all that aside, it was just such a great script and such a great story that it's that classic tale. I don't think you can make a better Western than that particular one. But getting back to the books, my idea, you mentioned generational thing. My thing is two things about the Lancer Westerns. Number one, Lancer is a compilation of, I grew up watching the 50s and 60s TV westerns, which there were tons of them. I mean, there were more than you could count. I watch them on the internet when I'm on the treadmill at the gym, and I watch them on YouTube. And it's like, oh, I forgot about that one, or I never knew about that one, and the pilots and things like that. So I grew up with my father, who was a huge Western fan, and we would watch these half-hour westerns. And I took a compilation of a lot of those guys, and that's my Lancer character with my own stuff thrown in, my own creation thrown in. And I think my biggest contribution is Lancer has a sweet tooth, as do I, and he carries around with him Turkish delight, which a lot of people don't know what that is, but it's a delicacy that has been around for a long, long time. And he carries it in saddlebags. It's kind of a gooey candy. It's kind of sweet, but not overly sweet. And so that's my real hardcore contribution to the character. And the other thing about Lancer is I write the Lancer books to be read from cover to cover on a 6-hour flight from Los Angeles to New York. That's my goal, and that's why they're all about 200 pages. And I think if you pick up one of the Lancer novels at the bookstore, you order one from me or from Amazon or wherever you get, or your Kindle, you're going to read it in one flight. and then you can read another one on the flight back. And that's my whole goal in the length and desire of these Westerns is that. I want you to be able to read it in one sitting when you really don't have anything else to do except, because your phone doesn't usually work up there and you don't really want to watch the movies that they provide for you. You don't want to have the kid next to you, hit banging on your arm or whatever, and there's nobody good looking sitting next to you that's female. So, and I say that in general terms. So, but anyway, that's why Lancer is always about the same length.
Okay, that's interesting. Actually, I just recently read. It's also about the pulp length, right? The classic pulp novels, or about
that was kind of where I wanted to go with it when I originally decided to write it. It took me a long time to decide to tackle a Western, and now I've written 5 of them. There will be 10 of the Lancers, and I'm kind of kicking around some ideas on another one I may write this year, just totally different. But the original idea was to write sort of a pulp fiction Western with the idea that, how am I going to write this? Because this genre is, you're making up the stories, that's, what you do. And the legends of the West became legends because they told their own stories. Or they had somebody who knew them and wanted to, make it bigger than it was. So what we have are legends. There's some truth to what's out there, some fact finding and stuff. And even the newspapers of the day. I mean, if you watch, there's one Western series slips my mind. Tales of something. I forget right now. But Jim Davis started it, and it says it always opens with from the official newspaper accounts of the day. Well, I've seen some of those, and I know the actual stories of what happened to some of these guys. And if those are the actual newspaper accounts of the day, that was yellow journalism from top to bottom. It was horrible. I mean, there was not a bit of truth. And Johnny Ringo did not die in the desert in Arizona, and so it was like just terrible stuff. So, legends are legends, and that's one of the reasons we love the West. It's legendary, and stuff got made up. So we really don't know everything that happened, even if you look at official records. So when you write a Western, you're creating something that is out of your own mind. But when Western readers read it, there has to be some fact-based stuff in it, which, research is easy today, especially if you're researching a city. Like each of my cities where a Lancer goes, I have to research the city itself and the time period, because I can't say that there was a railroad that went through here in 1881, and the railroad was developed in 1883. So I can't put Lancer on a train in 1881 because there was no train. And Western readers are going to know that, and if they don't, they're going to look it up. Guarantee they will look it up, and they will send you an email or say, "Hey, I'm not going to read any more of your books because you can't figure out what's going on." So that's important when writing historical novels of any kind, but especially with Westerns, because people are so dedicated. The Western genre readers are that dedicated, and they've read so much that by this point that they kind of know before you do where you're going with it.
Oh, that makes sense. It's kind of like a realization I had recently, because obviously I write science fiction and fantasy. It's kind of my bailiwick.
Something I can't write, by the way. I just can't do it. It doesn't work for me.
Well, but my realization recently was that I've been writing my books too short, because even though I've released a few novels in science fiction and fantasy, mostly I encounter I like short stories, like 40, 50,000 words, so about 100, 150 pages, 100, maybe 200 pages. But when I write fantasy, you can't tag a fantasy book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this trend, but fantasy has just kept getting longer over the years.
Right, it has.
So, we start off with Tolkien, and his books are, 500 pages long or whatever, and there's three of them that basically form a single story. But now we've got Brandon Sanderson doing 1,000-page books, and he's going to have 10 in a series or something like that.
Which is insane. I can't even imagine
He's an extreme example, mind you, but yeah.
Well, my latest book, first of all, let me ask you, do you play golf?
No.
Do you play softball or anything like that?
I'm not a sports guy.
Okay, all right. Well, for your sports listeners, I just wrote a recent book that we talk about short. It's 37 pages.
Oh, okay.
It's almost pamphlet. It's called Beating the Slump, and it's basically based on a theory that was tried in the late 60s with the Kansas City Royals Baseball Academy. And the guy who founded that and built that was a friend of mine. He was a former Major League general manager by the name of Sid Thrift. And I found out about this theory back when I was playing high school baseball, and then didn't continue with it, and then always wanted to write a book about it, because when I outgrew baseball physically and started playing golf, this theory works with golf. And so the book is called Beating the Slump, and I got so tired of watching my players of my favorite team, Pittsburgh Pirates, going through these slumps and not being able to get out of them. And I'm sitting there saying, I know how to do this, but I could talk to you for 5 minutes. I could get you out of this slump. And I always wanted to write a book about it. And they told me, well, if I wrote a book about it, I would have to get a couple of pro athletes. So I sought some pro athletes out. Their agents said no. Number one, not only would we not do it if you paid us. Number two, we don't want to take a chance on any of our multi-million-dollar athletes getting hurt. And so therefore, no. And it was golfers, basketball, baseball, you name it, because it works with many different sports. And so I just got tired. I said, screw it. I'm going to write my book. I'll do a video at some point and put it on a website. But for right now, I wrote the book. I wrote the book in 2 hours, and I had it published in another 2 hours. It took me longer to get the photos for the cover, because I wanted one baseball, one golf, me doing both from one from the left side, one from the right side, and we had to match those up, and my wife was my photographer, and that took probably longer than publishing and writing the book total. So, but it's out there. It's on Amazon. It's called Beating the Slump. You Google my name on Amazon, you search my name on Amazon, and it'll come up along with all my other books. So just wanted to slip that in. But anyway.
Okay, sure. There is a spot at the end of the show for plugs, but that's cool.
Yeah, I know there is, and I just wanted to get the book, that particular book in before I forgot.
No, that's cool. And that sounds interesting, actually. So because it kind of reminds me of what's this book? I didn't actually read it, but my twin brother has told me a lot about it, which was The Mental Game of Tennis. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not.
Okay, because that book is basically even though it's about tennis, it uses the example of tennis. It's very applicable to a lot of other stuff. It's like the kind of thing that anybody who has a performance task to do, like a sport or an art, can benefit from. And that's why my brother was telling me about it, because he knows I'm a writer, and it's kind of this thing where people are trying to, you're trying to do something, but just because you're trying to do something, like you want to win a game of tennis, that may not be the way to play the best game of tennis, right? That attitude is not going to necessarily give you your highest performance. So that's kind of what that book's about, is trying to get the actual highest performance. At least that's my understanding. It's actually been a little bit since I've heard about it. Anyway. Okay. Yeah.
So my book basically it's a system. Okay. Basically left versus right, and how to bring it's all about focus and refocusing, and doing that pretty much immediately, and physically, not sit there and yada 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 in your brain or whatever. It's physically going out and refocusing, and it's easy to do. And I'll leave it at that, because if I tell you any more, then you don't have to buy the book.
Okay, sure. It's not no spoilers.
37 pages.
A whole 37 pages. Come on. Yeah. So, as far you said, you write some other kinds of fiction though as well, not just westerns.
Right.
What is your other fiction?
The other fiction I've written, I wrote one called Al Kabul, Homegrown Terrorist, and that is set 25 years past Bin Laden, and it's all about grandson. Or grandchildren of Afghani warlords from the 90s and early 2000s who were born in America, grew up here, but still had a deep honor for what their Afghani warlord grandparents and so forth had in their minds. And it takes a different it's a terrorist book, And it basically is about this group of young men who decide to honor Osama bin Laden, at the same time try to eventually overthrow the government of the United States. And it's an FBI chase book. It takes place all over the country. It would probably make a very good film. I've had people ask me, why don't I write the screenplay to that? And I haven't. I've got other projects I'm working on. But at some point I may do that. But that's one of the other fiction books I've written. Okay. And then I've written a couple of three nonfiction. One's a memoir. So.
Okay. So mostly you've got, and when it comes to fiction, you write westerns. Okay, that makes sense now.
Right.
I was trying to get that cleared up in my own thought process there.
I in everything I do, I'm kind of broad based. The only thing, as I mentioned earlier, the only thing I really can't write, it just doesn't work for me. I can't write horror, and I really can't write sci-fi to a point. I say hard fantasy, I can't write those, but I can write sci-fi, but I can't write fantasy. And the thing about horror, every time I start to write it, it turns out Twilight Zone. It turns out thriller rather than a horror. I can't get into the blood and guts, and which you figure, okay, guy writes westerns, he should be able to get into blood and guts. And my westerns are not bloodless, certainly, but they're not gory. So
I know what you mean. Yeah, that's kind of a challenge for me lately. I mean, back when I was a kid, I would write stories that were way gorier. When I was a teenager.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
And now I have a really hard time even reading a story like that, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Or going to see one.
Yeah, no kidding.
But you see a film like Get Out was just incredible, and it was a horror film, mainstream horror film that just kind of transformed. I mean, if everybody in Hollywood pretty much is looking for horror scripts, number one, they sell. Number two, they're cheap. Mm-hmm. And number three, they're usually self-contained. You could do a horror film in a house. And so they're cheap to make. You don't have to have a bunch of locations. You don't have to go out and rent locations if you own your own home or if you rent one. And they're cheap. And they do sell, and quality-wise, as far as production and stuff, I don't think you really have to be as good because there's, look at... what was the film where they just shot walking through the woods?
The Blair Witch Project?
Yeah, Blair Witch. And it was like, okay, that made lots and lots of money, but it was just one of those things, and that's the way horror is. And unfortunately for me, I can't, or maybe fortunately for me, I just can't do it. It doesn't work for me.
So you are also a filmmaker. What's your position exactly in filmmaking? Do you just write the script, or do you direct?
No, I've done pretty much everything. In the situation today, when you're trying to really break into Hollywood, unless you've had an established name, I have an established name in my other career, which is I've been doing for almost 50 years. It's radio, network broadcaster, and I'm a local newscaster, local radio station here in Los Angeles. So that's where my reputation is, and now more writing as well. But when you try to break into Hollywood, it kind of doesn't really matter. So a lot of what's happening in Hollywood today, and a lot of it is because of the internet, because of streaming, because home equipment, and I'm talking cameras and microphones and stuff, is so much better. You don't even have to have super professional equipment, and if you don't have any money, you can make a film. Let's put it that way. So most people will make short films, and short films can be anywhere from 7 minutes to 20 minutes. And there are short films that are longer, but basically you're looking 7 to 18. And I've done 4. I've written all 4. I've produced all 4. I've directed all 4, although on 2 of them I had an assistant director. And I've been in 2 of them. And one of the latest one, I really didn't want to act in it, but my 4th actor, there was 4 actors in the film, and it was a Western, first Western I've done. And my 4th actor kept bailing on me. I had like 4 different guys to play the bartender, and all 4 something came up before shooting. So I said, screw it. I'll save the money. I don't have to pay myself. I'll do it myself. And it's only, I think I had 5 lines in the short film, which was fine. I could still direct it and have my assistant director direct me and do it that way. And so it worked. And so I've got a part in that one. And then the first film called Radio Play, an homage to old time radio, that's a 30-minute short film. That was my first one. And so we went a little longer. But that's sort of it's an over-the-top comedy, sort of mixture of film noir and Rocky and Bullwinkle. And so it's way over the top. It's campy, and it was designed to be campy. And it's all voiceovers. Nobody appears on film except in one scene, and that's the announcer who is reading. Basically, he reads over the film breaks. So there's like 5 film breaks. And on the last one, the film breaks, and he's there reading on camera. So it's like, oh, geez, now you caught us, So the film really never broke. So it was just a fun way to deal with it. And it was like, it was a plot to save Hollywood. It was sort of a Russian meddling thing before Russian meddling. And it was a guy, this former Russian agent, decides he has to destroy Hollywood. And he's going to destroy Hollywood like Cecil B. DeMille did with a flood. He's going to blow up the Hollywood Dam and flood Hollywood and destroy it because Hollywood is so decadent. And Tom Cruise makes $20 million for a film, and he can't even afford to go see one. So that's basically the plot. But it's a detective by the name of Bill Noir, and it's a lot of fun. And right now we are filming a takeoff on that, and we're not filming yet. We're actually getting some funding for this one, so it's gonna be a little bit different. Because usually my short films, I had funding for the last one. I actually got an executive producer and to put up some of the money up front. And I say no money, we're only talking some of these short films I made for less than $500.
Wow.
And you can do that, because I started paying the actors on the third film. Actors, most of them will, for an opportunity, even decent actors who are still trying to make their mark in Hollywood, they'll do it for free. And if you're on a short film, it's usually a 1-2 day shoot, so it's not, they're doing it in between their waitressing jobs or their, sales jobs, whatever they're doing. And then starting on the third one, I started paying people because I was actually able to pay them. And I would pay them scale, which for a 1-day shoot really isn't that much. So, I paid by crew, and so it worked. So the last one is called Sundown, which is a compilation, or a mashup, I should say, of a couple of Marty Robbins songs. And which I love Marty Robbins, a great storyteller. And so we're working with the Marty Robbins family on a feature film that hopefully will be able to get made sometime in the next couple of years. Then that's a mashup of 3 Marty Robbins songs.
Cool.
Yeah, it's westerns are fun because the stories are simple, and that's the nice thing about it.
I see. So because you do these 2 different mediums, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you also podcast, though that's more nonfiction, right?
Yes, that's all nonfiction.
Yeah, that's nonfiction. So,
right.
but when you're approaching storytelling from both the prose side, fiction,
mm-hmm.
and then you also have it sounds like you have kind of a similar you tell kind of similar stories in some cases in your films, though.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true? I guess I shouldn't lead you with that.
Well, the third film that we did, and that was a special one. The reason my 2 grandsons were in theater and doing very well in Texas, and I wanted to get them on film before they got old or they decided they didn't want to do this anymore. And so I wrote a short film script, which we went and shot at my daughter's house in Dallas. And it was a Home Alone with 2 kids and 1 burglar instead of 2 burglars and 1 kid. and it was an 18-minute film, and it was a lot of fun. We shot it one day. I hired a couple of local actors to play the other parts, and so it was sort of fiction based on fiction, which could have been a true story. The films, I think, basically, let's put it this way. I've written 18 scripts. Of the 18 scripts I've written, probably there's at least 2 that are based on true stories. One is my story, first breaking into radio, which was kind of really bizarre, and that's the reason I did it. And the other one is based on my first book, which is based on the true life of a big-time burlesque queen and her Major League Baseball playing husband. And that a story that I've had in my pocket since 1959, when I opened my first pack of baseball cards, and Don Rudolph's baseball card was in there, and on the back was a cartoon about his wife, it said Don's wife is a professional dancer. Well, she wasn't just a professional dancer, she was one of the highest paid strippers in the country at the time. And it's a 6-year-old kid sitting there saying, why is she on my baseball card? You know, and I held that story over the years, and it's been over 50 years that I've held that story, and I wrote the book, which is called Fan Letters to a Stripper. I pretty much own the rights to everything Paddy Wagon and Don Rudolph. I negotiated that with the family. And I also have written a screenplay called Major League Stripper. And it's about them and the transition of 2 people from the 40s to the 60s and early 70s. He was killed in 68 in a truck accident. She died in 92. And all of that came about, believe it or not, they lived, I was growing up in the San Fernando Valley, they lived about a mile away from me, and I never knew it.
Wow.
He actually, coached in one of the leagues, youth leagues that I played in the year before I joined that league. So it's like one of those things.
Just missed him.
Yeah, you know, and it's one of those things that I've got to do this story. You know, why would all of this land in my lap like this if I'm not going to do something with it? And I've done one thing, and now I really, really want to do the other. But I'm not even pitching that anymore, because I want to do it. I want another film to build my reputation first, because that's my passion project. That really is my passion project. I've got scripts that I've written for films that, you know, I just want to see them made. And they don't get made, but, you know, and I'm not opposed to rewriting them in any way, shape, or form. I've got my stuff on my passion script that, you know, I will stick with, I will hold true to and fight for. But the others, it's like, yeah, you want me to change this? Yeah, sure, why not? Go ahead. I don't really care that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably good to be flexible. It's got to be good to be flexible in the film industry, especially.
Yeah, because you have so many. You think you have, in writing a book, you have an agent, an editor, a manager, and you know, a publisher. And so let's say in writing a book you have 4 different people you have to deal with. Well, take all those people and then add director, production coordinator, casting director, photographers, sound people, script editors, and I'm sure I'm missing about a half dozen more, executive producers, and usually there's so many. I mean, just an executive producers or producers. When you go to a film, next time you go to a movie, count from the very beginning when the film comes on the screen. How many different companies are involved in just the producing? And you'll find that there's maybe 6 or 7 just in producing. And then the list, the executive producers, the guys who give the money, those guys. So there may be 10 or 12 names at the beginning of that film that are all involved that had to come together to make this movie. plus the credits at the end. I mean, forget that.
Yeah, those are endless.
Yeah, especially if it's animation. That's like a billion. We went to see last night Toy Story, and it's just unbelievable amounts of people. And it wasn't even Japanese anime. If you throw Japanese anime in there, then you've got 25% of the people in Japan probably that are on the film as well. So it's like a lot of folks. So.
Yeah, no kidding. In fact, that's like those movies that are based on old anime, like they just did Ghost in the Shell come out a couple years ago. And honestly, kind of unnecessarily, but whatever. I mean, I'm a big fan of the original animation for that movie.
There's a lot of bad movies that are made, and that's why there's so many streaming services. You can see bad movies anywhere, and that's why when critics, when they see a good movie, they just go overboard and gush all over it, and just say how good it is because they screen so many bad ones. I used to be in that part of business in my radio career when I worked with UPI Radio Network. I was on one of the lists, and so I would go to screenings at least once a week, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. And I was like, I never, ever, ever want to walk out on a movie, but I've done it twice. I did it once with, I think it was a Reanimator, and that was a screening, and it was just like, to be honest with you, I got tired of watching people masturbate.
That'd be an issue, yeah.
Yeah. I don't need this. I don't care if your back's to me or not. I just don't need it. Why am I here? And then the other movie I walked out on, it was early in my radio career, and I was trying to pick up some extra money because radio guys and their small markets don't make a whole lot of money. And I had a kid on the way. So I got a job as a doorman at a local theater. And one of the films they were showing was Happy Hooker Goes to Washington. And I think I lasted about 12 minutes. It was just so awful, just so bad. It's like, oh, let me out of here. You can't even keep me here with enough popcorn or Raisinets, So, so those are the only 2 films that I know that I ever walked out on. Oh, wait a second, there was one more. I can't think of what the name of it was, so I won't even go there. But it was just pretty bad. It was a teenage film of some sort.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and speaking of walking out, we are out of time.
Are we done? My goodness.
Yeah, already. Wow. I wasn't aware that you were such a talker, and that's great. Yeah. It's always fun to have people on the show who love to talk.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything you wanted to ask you didn't get to before we run?
I don't even know where I would start. It's you've raised many more questions than you've answered, but you've answered a lot. So it's been great having you.
Well, great. Nice to be here, Tim.
Yeah, where can people find your stuff? And you, especially.
Like anybody, just Google my name, Bob Brill. And when you do that, I come up usually first 18 of the first 20 Google references. The other guys, number one, I'm not the bodybuilder. I'm not Bob Brill, the bodybuilder. Please don't recognize me with that. I'm not Bob Brill, the drummer for Berlin. And I'm not Bob Brill, the designer. I think he's an Oscar-winning designer. And I'm not Bob Brill, even though I really bought and sold baseball cards a lot over my life, and I've done that too. There's a guy in Virginia who is in that business who's also a Bob Brill. That's not me. So you can do that on Amazon. Just put my name in the search engine, Bob Brill, and I'll come up with my books. And then if you want to, you can go to bobbrill.com, or that'll take you to all my sites, or bobbrillbooks.com, and you can find all my books there. And so you can find me just by Googling me, and I'm usually very early in the search engine. So
awesome. And you can find more of this podcast at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can also find us on Libsyn. I forget the URL for that, but you can find us there. And that's where all these episodes are hosted. And also, you can find my books at Amazon.com or on BookFunnel in some cases. BookFunnel.com, look for The Crimson Suitor. That's my first fantasy novelette that's out. It's going to be for my new series, which is going to be my focus going forward. So definitely check that out. And all it'll cost you is your email address. I know that's a hefty price in this day and age. But
sometimes it is, yeah.
Yeah. But be generous with it, because I think that's a good story, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good one.
That tears it.